Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good. This is a really special day. If you listen to the show, you know that there is one very special show in the Bailey household. If you've listened, you know that Bill Bailey, my dad, is obsessed with a hit television show called The Big Bang Theory. Not just that show, but the Big Bang extended universe. I have talked many times with him on this show about this television show. So I've seen it through the eyes of Bill Bailey. And this guy's a tough guy. And he watches these things religiously over and over again. So when I got the offer to interview somebody that is hosting the official Big Bang Theory podcast, I said yes. She also wrote The Big Bang Theory, the definitive inside story of the epic hit series. We have the one and only Jessica Radloff here with us today.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you, Bill. I feel like I need to call Bill now.
Well, no, he's finally proud of me. This is he was a Big Bang Theory,
no,
really? I talk a lot about reality television, and he doesn't get that, but this he gets. And I was, first off, the podcast is awesome. I think it's insanely good. And I geek out, and I think the audience geeks out of hearing behind the scenes lore. I mean, your first episode, you have Chuck Lorre, the creator.
Yes. On this. Yes. The iconic Chuck Lorre.
What do you think it is about Big Bang Theory that connects with every generation?
It is the fact that we had never really seen these kinds of characters before on television, especially someone, first of all, theoretical physicist, if anybody else tried to do a show,
it's a sexy profession. It's sexy. Yeah.
Anybody else tried to do a show about this, they would be like, what's going on here? But the innocence and the sensitivity that these guys had, plus you have Jim Parsons and Johnny Galecki, who are just brilliant, truly, as these characters. And then you add in Kaylee Cuoco in this ensemble. And a lot of people felt like they were watching themselves. I said in the book, too, and I stand by this, as much as all of us wanted to be as cool as the characters we saw on Friends, we could probably relate a lot more to the characters we saw on Big Bang. And they were not afraid to be as awkward as they were, where it came to social instances or, feeling like they could solve all these equations better than they could talk to a girl or a guy or whatever. So I just feel like we saw ourselves in them so much more than any other show, and it gave us the permission to be who a lot of us are, but we try to make sure it doesn't come out as much.
I also feel that, this is one of, I think, the last bastions of multicam sitcom done at this level. And, just for folks at home, The Office is what you consider a single cam sitcom, right? And there's a multicam format that was really hugely popular in the 70s and 80s and some of the 90s. But Big Bang Theory, to me, is one of the greatest multicam sitcoms because you are writing hard jokes. Like Chuck Lorre is a genius at setup, punchline, or rule of threes, all of these kind of technical things that these actors hit it out of the park with.
Every single time. And I think The Big Bang Theory is the last of its kind in terms of that juggernaut multicam series. And then also you add in, not just Chuck Lorre, but Steve Milaro, who was the other executive producer and showrunner. And he inserted so much heart into the series. And that's why people kept tuning in every week as well, because they wanted to see what was going to happen with these characters week after week after week. It wasn't just about jokes anymore. It was really about getting to the heart of these characters. So you add Chuck and Steven together, and it was just a recipe for just pure magic.
It was really interesting to hear Chuck Lorre on your first episode. Great person to kick it off with. Plus, you had the Warner Brothers chairman, Peter Roth, on there, which was interesting because you have Peter just saying, we want to be in the Chuck Lorre business.
Yes.
Because, just to remind the audience, Chuck Lorre, Dharma and Greg, Two Guys, a Girl in a Pizza Place.
Not that one, but Two and a Half Men.
Two and a Half Men.
Yes, and he also started on Roseanne. Easy. There's a lot of titles.
Two and a Half Men, it comes up a lot in this first episode of the podcast, but that was such a juggernaut in itself with Charlie Sheen.
Oh my God, yes.
But he also makes this point of Two and a Half Men was very, a lot of sexual jokes, a lot of sexual humor.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't know that The Big Bang Theory had 2 pilots. And the pilot is the first episode that is sold, and we're going to pick this up to series for 24 episodes. I didn't realize that there were 2 pilots. And the first pilot, he was still in Two and a Half Men land, where he was having kind of sexual jokes that didn't work with these characters.
Right. And what's so funny is that on today's podcast that I just recorded, Lee Aronson was the guest. And Lee Aronson was the co-creator with Chuck for 2.5 Men. And Lee came over from 2.5 Men to Big Bang to help Chuck out because Chuck was like, I did not know how to do this show and 2.5 Men at the same time. And he needed that extra help. So here you have these two guys from 2.5 Men coming over to Big Bang. And they admit there was a really steep learning curve because they had to understand that the characters on Big Bang were not the characters that you saw on 2.5 Men. And they were so much more innocent than what, you had with Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
And also, originally, Sheldon was asexual.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. So, compare the character of Charlie to Sheldon, and it's a completely different playing field.
But it was so revealing in that episode to see who Chuck Lorre, legend, right?
Yeah.
So I'm listening to this, and it's really interesting. You get him to say something of like, almost about having to find your voice again. And you're like, this dude is already one of the most successful people by the time 2.5 Men, is going.
Right.
That Big Bang, this guy is still like, he gets an opportunity to do the pilot again. So they do it and they're like, it's not quite there yet. Do you want an opportunity to do it again? And he says, you know what I do?
Yes.
And for me, I'm like, wow, this guy had no ego in there. He was like, I want to get it right.
Yeah, no ego at all. And he admitted it sucked. Like he was first to say, like, we did not do a good job. We failed with these characters.
But he still wanted to do it.
He still wanted to do it. And it's a testament to him and Bill Prady that they were like, yeah, we know there's something here, but we've got to rework the whole thing. And I think a lot of people, that's a big misconception about Chuck, is they think like, okay, he's this, like burly guy that has like this huge ego and everything. And he is, and I know, and he will tell you too, he has mellowed out quite a bit from the early days, because he had a temper and everything. But he is so kind. He is one of the most charitable people I have ever met in my life. And also the fact that he trusted me with this book and now with this podcast to say, like, here's the keys to my kingdom. You run with it. I mean, this guy is loyal to a fault, and he knows, like, surround yourself with great people that are there for you. He will be there for you as well. And
Chuck,
please
never
forget
take
that.
my calls. I really would appreciate. No, it was really, you had this sweet moment at the end of the podcast where you even thanked him for entrusting, you with this juggernaut in a sense. And how did this start? Because it started with the book.
It started with the book.
And you write for Glamour, and
yes.
you've been a writer, what is your career trajectory?
I mean, I never thought it was going to be what it is, but that's sometimes the best plans, right? And just by the way, a funny aside is that I told Chuck, because I'm so grateful to him, I'm either going to have to name my firstborn or my first pet after Chuck. And it'll be like Charlie, maybe if it's a girl, and then Chuck if it's a guy, and stuff, because I am so thankful. And he, aside from my parents, he was the first person I called when I found out that the Big Bang Theory book made the New York Times bestseller list. And I was crying on the phone with him. And I was like, we did it. It wasn't just me. It was we did it, because without him, this would not have happened, period.
Wow.
And he never once said to me, like, okay, you can't ask this or stay away from this topic.
It was all open.
It was all open. And that is unheard of to me.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to the podcast, just, also very soft-spoken in a sense.
Yes, that's the thing. You should have heard, by the way, when we did the audio version of the book and they had somebody play Chuck's role, so to speak. And the first person that they sent to me was like, hi, I'm Chuck Lorre. And I'm like, who is this person? This is not what Chuck, I mean, I know you're not going to get someone that sounds exactly like him, but I'm like, if you think he is this very deep sounding, like, no, that's not it at all. So, yeah.
It's interesting to actually, we've been talking, like, I was interviewing somebody about Lorne Michaels last week from SNL, and it really is interesting when you get a peek behind the curtain at some of these big figures that have made these. And I really... as I get older, I'm really impressed by people that have built things and just their temperament. And it's very different than performers or Johnny Galecki or Jim Parsons who are playing these characters. And it's this really weird peek behind the curtain that I love, that they have to be really vulnerable in a spot where they're not used to being vulnerable.
Right. It's so true. And you asked how I got from the book and my career trajectory. I didn't mean to not answer that. But no, I've been at Glamour now for 13 years as a senior editor now. And I really got to know the cast of Big Bang early on in the show's run. I would see them a lot.
Was that a big Glamour hit? Was the Big Bang?
You'd be very surprised. It wasn't right out of the gate, but later on, especially when they introduced Melissa Rauch and Mayim Bialik as Amy and Bernadette, it really opened up the stories for women. And by the end of the series run, The Big Bang Theory was the most popular show among women, which was a really cool fact because I was like, I'm not surprised about this because I wrote about it so much and people were reading these pieces every single week. So I knew that there was such an audience for it because they really were in touch with how these guys dealt and reacted with, someone of the opposite sex and how these women dealt with the guys and how they reacted. So it was a surprise, but in the best way. And then at the end, I wasn't surprised at all. And
so you always loved the show when you were covering it.
Yes, except I watched this is what's so funny. I watched the first 2 episodes of the show back in 2007 and I was not at Glamour yet. And I was like, okay, it's cute. And then I stopped watching. And it wasn't until about 3 years later, I was home for the holidays in St. Louis, sick as a dog on the couch. And my parents are like, we just started watching The Big Bang Theory.
It's always the parents.
It's in syndication.
It's a feeder system to younger people.
And I'm like, put on C-SPAN, put on whatever you want. I'm so sick. I don't care what I watch. And I know the exact episode. It was the one with Jodie Lynn O'Keefe. And she played this like hooker stripper in Vegas to help Wolowitz get over, Leslie Winkle breaking up with him. And the humor was so spot on and so funny. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that's how I started getting into it again. And now when I was interviewing the actors, I could actually say, hey, I'm actually watching your show now. So I
like it now.
I do. So it took me a little bit, but then once I did, I got so into it. And then I went back and everything. And now it's like I'm the official biographer. And it's crazy how it all came to be.
Which, by the way, all episodes are streaming on Max. So
Yes.
if you have not started and you're looking for something to take you away from really wild times, this is a great place to start. If you are looking for a 23-minute escape that you can watch a handful in a night, my dad will continue to do this for the rest of his life. So anytime I'm there, we're watching like 30 episodes. It's on like background music. It is so interesting.
It's so good.
So then how does the podcast come? What's the evolution from the book to the pod?
So the podcast actually, the idea came about 2.5 years ago. I was having lunch with the Warner Brothers PR team and we were just kicking around ideas and one of the publicists said, are there any podcasts you think that would be good for Warner Brothers to do? And at first I thought it was a joke, like, really? And I'm like, well, The Big Bang Theory. I was like, the book's coming out in a few months. Like, it would be great. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna look into this. And then I got a call for a meeting with Warner Brothers. And again, this is all a testament to Chuck, because if Chuck wasn't supportive of any of this, it would not have happened. So that's never lost on me. And then, we started up with meetings and everything and getting permission and, all the stuff. And then finally, it was last August that Max was like, we are going to buy the first 40 episodes and let's get going on this. And it is just a dream. I mean, it's been a lot of work. I'm not going to lie about that because I take it so seriously. And I'm watching these episodes over and over again through such a different eye and writing down clip times and all these things.
You're having nightmares about Big Bang Theory at this point.
Yeah, exactly. You know what it's like doing a podcast. It's never as easy as it seems. There's so much work you put into it. And so I am so grateful. But when I sit in that chair, I'm having the time of my life with these guests and discovering things about the show that I thought I knew everything from the book. And then they'll tell me something and I'm like, damn it. Like, can I go back to the book and put a little, addendum in there to say like.
You can do addendums each year to this
so
book.
That's what I want to do because I find out things that they tell me and I'm like, no way. Like, why didn't you tell me this in the first place?
Well,
so
I want to tell the audience, the first episode is out right now. Go subscribe, rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That really helps like in the search optimization of all of that. And I know that's a sexy term that the Big Bang.
It really is. In our business, we love it.
But the second episode has one of my favorite sitcom directors of all time. You interview James Burrows.
Yes, Jimmy Burrows. You got that right.
And I'm not allowed to call him Jimmy because I don't know him that way, but he directed all Cheers, Friends, Will and Grace. Any hit sitcom has had this man's name attached to it in some way. And I read his autobiography last year, or I listened to his autobiography last year. And he just blows me away. What was that conversation like? What are you looking to get from him in that kind of conversation?
There were only two people while I was doing the book that I would not call by their first name. And I had to call them Mr. So-and-so. And the first was Mr. Bob Newhart, because when I was on the phone with Mr. Newhart, I mean, what am I going to say? Yeah. Exactly. And he did say, you've got to call me Bob. And I was like, okay, Bob, and then the other one was Mr. James Burrows. I did not know what in the world, like, His Royal Highness, is that what I call him? So I did say Mr. Burrows. He did not say at the time, like, you can call me Jimmy. And I'm like, okay, so this is Mr. Burrows. But on the podcast, you will hear this next week where I actually bring this up to him and I say how nervous I was because I did not know what to call him. And I was like, is it Mr. Burrows? Is it James? He's like, it's like James, Jimmy, and
call me Hitmaker.
Yeah, and he was great. I mean, he is again another soft-spoken guy,
and they're just in it for the work. What you realize,
they're just in it. Yeah,
listening to Chuck Lorre and even Peter, like they're in it. It's obviously business, and there's this aspect of commerce, but at the end of the day, Chuck is looking to solve a problem. He's looking to see how these characters connect and unite, and there's so much heart in everything he does. And I thought that was so interesting. It's really about like solving almost like math equations in the Big Bang Theory.
Yes, absolutely. And there's such an iconic scene in the pilot episode of the Big Bang Theory between Sheldon, Leonard, and Penny with the hi. And that was Jimmy Burrows who really made that scene come to life, because in the script it was not that involved. But he was the one that was like, we're gonna work with this a little bit to figure out how
he saw that something was there. He saw it.
Here's the other thing about Jimmy Burrows that he made a great point to me. He said the reason that shows like Friends, Will and Grace, Big Bang succeed is that because audiences are feeling like they are discovering the talent when they're watching them. These are not a lot of household name people when they first started, and the audience feels like they're responsible for taking them to the next level. This is their discovery that they're so happy to talk about. And he discusses like how that is so important to the success of a show.
Because if you think to Friends, yeah, right. Like we thought David Schwimmer was ours, or we thought we discovered Jennifer Aniston.
The only person you knew was Courtney Cox.
Yeah.
If that even, because of Family Ties.
Or the Bruce Springsteen video.
Right, exactly.
I mean, that's so interesting. You're right. Like when we watch, it's like we think we discovered Jim Parsons, or even Johnny Galecki, Christmas Vacation, Roseanne. But really, I mean, coming into like full prominence in Big Bang Theory.
Yep, that's exactly right. So...
I've been kicking around Hollywood for a long time. I started off as an actor, and I am ashamed to admit that I was in acting class the year that the first pilot was made. So these audition sides, I remember kicking around.
Did you audition for something?
No, I didn't have that. At that point, I didn't have a good agent. You still don't. But we auditioned with these sides. And I remember trying to make heads or tails of these, because it was like Sheldon, and you're like, well, this is very specific voices.
Yes.
And we were doing the material and the jokes were there, but it was almost, our teacher was like, it's going to be a really specific person that just emanates, like this person is Sheldon. And I think with Jim Parsons, he's obviously an amazing actor, but he is Sheldon.
He is Sheldon. Absolutely.
And nobody else can do that.
No. And, there's so many talented actors out there, and you think like, of course, this is the only Sheldon we know. So of course he's the only person that could do this. But I really do think he is the only person that could have done this particular role. And he knew that when he went in for the first audition. And he was even kind of frustrated when he did go in for that first audition, because they made him do another scene again to see if he could still replicate it and do it. And he was like, damn it, are you sure? And they're like, do you need a minute? Are you okay? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. I'll go in and do it. But they were so blown away by that audition for him that it was like, it was lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. They have the first pilot. Penny's not in the first pilot.
No.
Right?
No.
So Haley Cuoco doesn't come in till the second pilot, correct?
Which is the one that people can watch on Max.
Which, by the way, though you do make a point in the first podcast to say there are clips floating around.
Oh, yes.
Do you care that these clips are floating around? And, Chuck...
They do, but they didn't care enough because they still came on the podcast to talk about it. So,
you made him watch it.
I made him watch it.
So she makes them watch the failed pilot the weekend before this interview. And I thought, that is ballsy. Like, you're making him look at his failed work in a sense. He knows that it's a happy ending, but wild.
Again, that's why I have to name my firstborn either Charlie or Chuck, because I'm so grateful to them that, yeah, that's what Chuck will do. I'm just so thankful that, yeah, he watched it for me to talk about it, because he will tell you it's not his finest work. And, but
I don't know. I thought it was so many revelations in this first episode. But then what I was also interested in is the slow success of this. I mean, they put it on right after 2.5 Men on CBS. And then eventually at the end of the second season, they move it to Thursday nights, which is like, they want the protection, the cover of 2.5 Men, but it goes to Thursday nights and it grows, and they have a trip to Brazil, is it?
Yes.
Where they are mobbed.
Like the Beatles. Cast. Yes. Kunal Nair was getting emotional talking to me about this experience that he had being in Brazil, because he was like, it was like the Beatles. I've never experienced anything like it.
And if you know the cast of Big Bang Theory, you don't see, hey, there's the Beatles.
No. No, even though Wolowitz looked like one of the Beatles, and that was the reason for that haircut. But yeah, no, it was. And by the way, did you know that Ringo Starr, they wanted him to come on and play Wolowitz's dad originally because of the haircut? So yeah, no, it was. They were shocked. They were shocked at Comic-Con when they went for the first time. Chuck warned them that 11 people might show up, and then they get there, and there's a line waiting outside to get into the ballroom.
I'm shocked that they were shocked, because the characters have such a love of superheroes and comic books and that whole world.
Yeah, but don't forget, too, this was 2007, 2008. We had MySpace, but like Facebook, Instagram, all that we know the way we do didn't exist. So it was harder to track what was going on when you didn't have those, those areas readily available. So I think that's probably why they were shocked, is there was no way to really measure the success just based on what existed at the time.
And in a way, it kind of is so nice to think back to that more innocent times of just MySpace.
Oh, yeah. And to think also that Johnny and Kaylee were dating and nobody knew, that would have never happened today.
That's what I was going to ask about, too, is that, obviously you've done the book, you've gained all of their trust.
Yeah.
But, we did have two of these people dating that I don't remember, they weren't Us Weekly cover story people. They were doing this under the cover of darkness in a way.
Oh, yeah.
So, do they talk about their relationship and how they were able to keep going?
Oh, yeah, they do. And it was so I'll never forget doing their first interview together about their relationship. And the entire time I'm looking at my recorder, making sure this is still recording. Okay. Are they really telling me this? Yes. Because it was just, they were so happy to talk about it, and they're still such good friends. So that was fun. And then also on the podcast, what's great is I'm sure people were sick of this, but I asked so many of the behind the scenes people, so what was your first indication that these two were sneaking around and dating? And everybody on the podcast has had such different stories about how they knew that Johnny and Kaylee were an item. And it's just so funny. Anthony Rich, who was the first AD and then director on the show, he said to me that when he, I think, got married, he got a call from Kaylee, and then 5 minutes later got a call from Johnny, and he was like, this is interesting because Johnny's never up at this hour. So what is going on? And that's how they would figure this out. And everybody has their own story, which just killed me.
Were people nervous about that relationship because it could affect the overall brand in a sense?
Terrified. And hopefully, of course, if we get more seasons down the line of the podcast, we'll go into I think it was around season 4 when they did break up in real life, and how they were worried about certain, scenes kind of almost mimicking what was happening in real life, because the characters were also going through a breakup. So, it's fascinating to see how this played out. And also the scenes where Kaylee admits in the show she was falling in love with Johnny. And then now to go back and dissect those scenes and be like, okay,
And they're both married to other people
They're both married to other people now. Well, Kaylee's technically engaged, but yes. And you go back and you're like, oh yeah, she was blushing a little bit more in this scene with Johnny. And okay. And going back and really dissecting it is just fascinating.
So there's 273 episodes of the Big Bang?
79.
279 episodes.
Not even counting the unaired pilot. So 280 if you
280 if we count that. And your podcast, there's only one episode out right now, but you have recorded 41 episodes.
41 so far, yeah.
Which is oh my God, you're supposed to do these in advance? I do these day to day. And I'm that's a lot of work to do without anybody out in the world yet.
Yes, it is a lot of work. It has been the biggest labor of love in the best way possible. To sit down with Christine Baranski and watch Christine watch her scenes and talk about them was like the greatest gift to get to do that.
What is she like watching herself work?
It's the most incredible experience, Ryan, because she gets such a kick out of herself in this
That's what
role.
I was wondering, because some people don't love to watch themselves, and then some people are able to separate that, and they're able to like just technically zone in on it.
Wait until her episode of the podcast comes out, because she is hysterical laughing. And then there's a scene in her very first episode where she is singing a Journey song, Any Way You Want It. And she starts singing it on the podcast. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh my God, Christine Baranski is now singing Journey on our podcast right now. And she just got the biggest kick out of it. So does like Kunal Nair, who played Raj. He comes on in the first 10 episodes, and watching him watch his scenes and then talk about it is so damn funny. I could not get enough of it. Or like John Ross Bowie, who played Kripke.
Great improviser as well.
Yes, so smart, so brilliant. He came on and then taught me how he did the Kripke accent and, or the speech patterns. And that's so fun. So things like that you can't do in a book, but you can do in a podcast and ask them about. It's so much fun.
So, I mean, are you breaking it down by season? Is the first 41 focused on the first 2 seasons?
It's the first 2 seasons, and we are going episode by episode.
So you guys, you better make this a hit, because if my dad does not get, if we do not get further stories, I'm going to be in trouble during the holidays. But I mean, it is that labor of love, right? Like you are doing, like you get to talk to people about a great time in their lives and some sort of creative spark that only comes around every so often nowadays.
Yes. And I will tell you this, one of the things, I don't want to say I regret the most, but I didn't get to do when I was writing the book, is I really wanted to sit down with some of the actors and the producers to watch the episodes and dissect them and go through them. And because of COVID, we really weren't able to do it. It was so much on Zoom. So now getting the chance to do it. And that's why I'm so happy that I made Chuck watch that first unaired pilot, or watch
I'm so glad I got to humiliate
yes,
him in person.
Because now we get to go through each episode. And here's the other thing. There were never any audio commentary on the DVDs for Big Bang. They never did any audio commentary where they talked about the behind the scenes of the episodes. So you never knew what they were really thinking. Now we get the chance to kind of do that audio commentary in a podcast form that they never did on a DVD.
So kids, there used to be this thing called a DVD before streaming. We love Max, but there used to be I'm a big fan of physical media, and they would have always like director commentary tracks on films and certain TV shows. But this is, you're saying, basically that thing that we never got with the DVD sets.
Yeah, and it's great. And what we tried to do too with every episode is pick an actor or a writer or, a set designer that really has a big episode so they can talk about it. Like there's the episode where, oh God, I'm forgetting which character it was, shoots with a paint gun Sheldon's spot on the couch. And we brought in the set designer to talk about that episode because you screw up that couch, you better have an extra one. And where did she get the couch? And what's going on with the couch when it's not in use? Because this is such a pivotal piece that is part of this show. If that gets ruined, the whole thing is kind of screwed up. So we really tried to okay, who can best speak to this episode and have some really interesting stories to share that we have not heard before.
What are some of the other biggest surprises you found out in these first 41 episodes?
41 episodes.
Because you already wrote the book.
Yeah.
But you said you're still finding out things.
I'm still finding out stuff.
Is there anything that's still kind of I guess even with the book, what is the biggest thing that floors you about this show when you found out it was a lost moment?
I think a lot of casting stories that I didn't know still, and that surprised me. Hearing Melissa Rauch went up for the role of Ramona Nowitzki back in season 2, I think it was, and that role was eventually played by Ricki Lindholm. And her not being right for the role then, and then she comes back in season 3 for the role of Bernadette. So there's a lot of casting stories that I was completely shocked by. Also things that I never got to ask for the book. I never interviewed Vernee Watson, who
they both compliment in the first episode.
Yes, she is an Easter egg in every single one of Chuck Lorre's shows.
Yeah, what is Chuck World?
I know, Chuck World. That was actually a term coined, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but she was one of the writers and stars of Bob Hart's Abishola, Gina Yashir. She was the one that coined Chuck World, and we all stuck with it. And it was just Shonda Rhimes has Shondaland. So we're Chuck World.
Yeah, he deserves a Chuck World.
Chuck World. Why not? So that's where we coined that. So Vernee Watson, who also now is on Shrinking, she is a staple of every Chuck sitcom. She did have a big role in Bob Hart's Abishola, but she was also in 2.5 Men. I think she started in Dharma and Greg. She was in an episode of Young Sheldon. And a lot of times she always plays a nurse, and it's Nurse Althea. So it was like, it's an Easter egg. And she was the only other remaining cast member that came over from the unaired pilot to the pilot. And then she makes other appearances in Big Bang as a nurse, like when Howard comes into the emergency room because he has that robotic arm that gets stuck on his business. And she's there. And she makes these great appearances. So she got to come on for an episode. And I wore my scrubs for that episode because I'm like, any chance that I can get to dress up for this show, I will do it.
Podcast is a visual medium now.
Yes,
it started this audio, now it's visual.
It really is. I did it multiple. Oh, you'll get another kick out of this is that the bath item gift hypothesis, which Bill will know because that is the holiday episode where Sheldon gets the Leonard Nimoy signed napkin from Penny. So Steve Milaro was the guest for that because Steve was instrumental in making that episode what it was. Originally, it was supposed to be a signed picture of Leonard Nimoy that they were like, that doesn't have the same gravitas as a napkin with his DNA on it. So Steve was the one that was instrumental in that story coming to life the way that it did. But Steve actually has the Rubik's Cube tissue holder box in his own house, that the one that you saw on the show Forever, he has in his house. So he brought it for that episode, and it's like unveiling this beautiful, egg, this like diamond egg, like he's got it in a box and he takes it out because we had a replica Rubik's Cube tissue holder the entire run of the podcast so far. So he brings the real one in for the podcast.
I love how in-depth geekery this is. Like this is what this is what it's So Bad It's Good is all about. It's like, like if you love something, love it hard. Like find out everything about it.
And he wore the Santa hat like Penny does in the episode. So I'm like, let's just full on fanboy out over this show and go for it. Because if we can't do that, then what are we here for?
Yeah, my God, I'm like, you're preaching to the choir over here. Mayim Bialik, obviously, one of the stars of the show. How did she come to the show? We knew Mayim before, Blossom, right?
Yep.
But she comes on the show, and also, I think, to your point earlier of Chuck Lorre, writes really strong female characters as Big Bang Theory continued. Like Melissa Rauch, Mayim Bialik, Kaylee Cuoco. These are amazing comedians in their own right. What was her entrance on the show?
So she came on at the very end of season 3 as a blind date that Raj and Wolowitz set up for Sheldon. And at the time, they did not know if she was going to stick around. And in fact, the audience wasn't fully sold on her for the first half of season 4. And Jim Parsons ended up telling me that if there was a world in which she wasn't going to continue, he was going to actually go and say something to the producers. And he never was one to insert himself into any storyline.
Just because he had a feeling.
But he knew there was something there with this character. And so did Steve Milaro. Steve Milaro really was the impetus for getting a character like Amy on the show. And when she came on, what's also interesting is that Mayim Bialik's name was mentioned in a previous episode of The Big Bang Theory in season 2, I want to say, where they talked about the actress from Blossom, clearly never knowing she was going to actually be on the show. But they got her at the end of season 3. Mayim had never seen the show before. She didn't really watch television. She had no idea who these people were. She comes in, she needed health insurance, and then, she gets this role, and then it turns into something really big. But originally in those early days in season 4, the audience was not sure what to make of Amy. And it was a very different Amy than the Amy that everybody now knows and loves. She was so much more rigid and just uptight and everything. And then she loosened up a bit, and it was magic.
I always try to impress upon the audience. You see these things, and you automatically assume that everybody in this are millionaires. Yeah. Even once you hit the show, you're a millionaire.
You're right.
And I love that. I'm trying to get her health insurance through SAG.
Oh yeah.
And so each gig, you don't know when that gig is going to come. You don't know if it's going to be successful or not. And there's also this thing that you have to give somebody a shot.
Yeah.
You have to wait for something to blossom,
Yes.
And not to
no
use the
pun intended. I was like, well played there,
we're
Ryan.
Geeking out, but no, you have to, and it's hard in today's culture. We want things so quick. We don't give things time to grow. And Big Bang Theory is something that slowly grew in fandom.
Yep.
They gave people opportunities, and people grew to love it. And that's what I get sad about thinking about that show being over, because like I said, you only have a handful of these in a lifetime.
Right.
And with the way media is going, will there be able to ever be another Big Bang Theory?
Yeah. Well, there is a spinoff that's in the works with Max.
Yeah, see that I wanted to see if you could talk about that because we have the Big Bang Extended Universe.
Yes.
You have Young Sheldon, which is over now.
Yep.
Very sad. That was a single cam sitcom.
However, here's the great thing about Young Sheldon is it exploded in viewership when it went to Netflix. And kids now are obsessed with this show. Season 7 of Young Sheldon still has not dropped yet on Netflix. So
it's kind of like Suits.
I feel like it's going to completely like even blow up some more when that show drops on there. But yes, so Young Sheldon, then Georgie and Mandy, which is now airing on CBS and Paramount Plus. And then there is a Big Bang Theory spinoff with Kevin Sussman, who played Stuart, Lauren Lapkus, who played Denise, who Stuart was involved with at the end of the Big Bang Theory. John Ross Bowie, who played Kripke, is also attached to it. And this is coming to Max. And Chuck,
exclusively to Max.
Exclusively to Max. And Chuck and Bill Prady are working on it again. So it's like the dream team kind of reunited for that. But what's fun about doing the podcast at the same time that this spinoff is in the works is that there are certain people that we have on the podcast, let's say like a Sarah Gilbert, who played Leslie Winkle, where I'm like, we never got a proper ending to
so you're
Leslie
like casting,
Winkle. So
you're
I'm
casting
like wondering,
the Max show
would
now.
you go on? Would you want to revisit this character?
And has anybody said no?
No, they have not. So you'll have to see what certain people, like Sarah Gilbert, her episode is coming up. I think it's episode 5. And she talks about that because a lot of people wanted to know, like, you know, what about Leslie Winkle? Sarah Gilbert was a series regular in the beginning, and then it kind of, you know, her character fizzled out. So could there be life for her in this Big Bang Theory spinoff? So,
well, I guess, I mean, I was talking about this in terms of reality television the other day of like, you know, Vanderpump Rules is over for the most part, but, you know, give it 15 years. There'll be a reunion.
Of course, yes.
Everybody will be psyched.
Yes.
But is there a world in why can't we have Johnny and Jim? Like, why can't we do more episodes of the actual Big Bang Theory? Do you ever get the feeling that people warm up to the idea? Because this was like still one of the highest rated sitcoms on television when they decided to end the show, right?
Right. It was still doing very, very well. It's something that I don't think Jim Parsons actually gets enough credit for because he stayed with this character for 12 seasons. Even Steve Carell didn't do that on The Office. He left before The Office was over. Jim gave everything. There was no commitment to a 13th season about doing any more. So would some of those main original cast members come back to do this spinoff? I don't think it's out of the question. I also think that a lot of them are content to leave it where it ended because it ended so perfectly. What I will say, and I have no inside information on this, so I'm not trying to be coy. I really am not on this one. I do think, you know, for a lot of them, because Kaylee even joked to me at one point, she's like, Jess, I want you to host our reunion special. I think when they saw what Friends did on Max with that reunion, which kicked off the launch of HBO Max and now Max, I think the Big Bang cast saw that there was a world in which they could maybe do something like that down the line, something that isn't necessarily scripted, but a chance to get them all as a reunion and back. I could see that happening. Years down the line, more than I could them all coming back for the spinoff. And also I think too, you know, when you do have Kevin Sussman and Lauren Lapkus and John Ross Bowie, you know, and others involved, they want to have them, they want to give them their moment to shine and to make it their own. But I would not be surprised at all if you see some of the originals pop up in there. But, you know, it's still in the early stages at Max. So, you know, but nothing would surprise me because this universe has truly taken on a life of its own. And every single actor will tell you that their career was made from this show. And they are so grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, Raj and all those guys. I mean, lightning in a bottle. And, for them as actors to take off in the way that they did because of that show. I mean, truly amazing. The podcast, you say they're working on this Max spinoff. Do you ever ask like, "Hey, Chuck, how's it going? Is the writer's block? What's going on?" Like, do you ever just in terms of like, where are we on that?
Right. I'm actually going to be seeing Chuck later tonight over at Georgie and Mandy because I'm going to go over and visit them at the taping. So I'll see. But it's also hard. It's weird because it's like I'm such good friends with all of them now. I just enjoy being in their company and not even like almost talk. And also, I want to be surprised as a fan. So I don't want to know too much about all of that. But there were times, of course, during Big Bang's run where I would offer my suggestions. I really wanted to see Sheldon babysit Wolowitz and Bernadette's kids. I was like, this would have been a great episode to do. And they're like, yes, but then we would actually have to have the kids and show them. And I was like, okay, but still. So,
Were there any avenues that the show took, in your opinion, that was a wrong turn? Or that they had to get themselves out of? Like, oh, they wrote themselves into a corner with this storyline.
Yes, and I would tell them that. That's the one thing.
No,
I'm always a big proponent of being honest with kindness, because also I want people to know when I really love something, I'm really like praising it. It's not just words. And even Steve Milaro in The Big Bang Theory will tell you there were certain storylines he did not like, or they had to kind of backtrack or get out of. One was in season 4, I believe, when it looked like Penny and Raj hooked up. And Milaro really had a tough time with that one. He's like, how do we get ourselves out of this? And they did. I also remember telling the writers, there weren't many times at all, because for the most part, I loved what they did, and they did it better than anybody else. So who am I to say, oh yeah, I would have tanked the show. But there was a storyline in season 12 where Leonard wanted to donate his sperm to Penny's ex-boyfriend and his new wife. And I was like, no, God, no. No. Like, no.
We do not want
Get a dog, but no. Like, what is going on?
Well, you have that scene in the pilot with the sperm bank.
Yeah, exactly. What is the obsession with sperm on the show?
Chuck Lorre, the failed pilot is too sexual, and then we have to get to asexual.
But here's the crazy thing. The sperm bank scene that was in the original pilot ended up still staying in the pilot that now airs on Max. And Max is the only place you can watch
Which
it.
I think Chuck Lorre was surprised by. I don't think he knew.
He doesn't like that either. But it's on Max. And because if you watch it in reruns on Nick or TBS or whatever, it's not there. The episode does not start with them in a sperm bank. So that's why I'll never forget watching when Max launched. And I'm watching the first episode of Big Bang, and all of a sudden I see a sperm bank, and Vernee Watson is the nurse in the sperm bank, and I'm like, I clicked on the wrong show. This is not the right show. I clearly did not know what I was doing when I was signing up for this. And then you see Sheldon and Leonard are like, huh? What's going on here? But that scene still exists. And then American Airlines, when they had the rights to the show, and they were showing that episode in their airplanes, they actually had to have Johnny and Jim, I think, interrupt that scene and be like, this scene was removed. So when we make a joke later in the series about it, that is because the scene doesn't exist.
He filmed a thing just for American Airlines?
They had to film a thing just to say, like, we took this scene out so you know. But it's still on Max. And I don't know how that got past Chuck, because I feel like, Chuck, all you needed to do was make a phone call and be like, I don't want this scene in there. But it's on Max.
I love that they were afraid of walkouts on an airplane. So they put they just don't want any danger in the air.
Yes,
so they have to
forget it. But it's wild to see a character like Sheldon, who, as Chuck and Peter said in our first episode, the character of Sheldon slept with a woman, Gilda, in the show. They knew to take that out for the second pilot, but they left the sperm bank scene in. You're welcome. Go watch it on Max.
Yeah, it's a couple more things. You talked about going to the Georgie and
Mandy first marriage.
Yeah, sorry, it's
it's a mouthful, I know. Yes,
but I wanted to, for the audience that isn't aware that how sitcoms are put together, is that they write these episodes, they rehearse them, and then there's a shooting day, right? And you have a live studio audience that come in. And these are professionals, and I'm sure you were around for some. Were you around for some of the Big Bang Theory tapings?
Yes.
So how long would they go in terms of taping days? Because I remember reading things about the Friends set where they would be like 12-hour shooting days with a live audience that would get exhausted.
Right. It's actually annoyingly short for Big Bang and
Georgie
and Mandy. They are so good and they are so fast that when I go, this is one of my favorite parts. I'm very grateful to be in this position that I've been given the choice of, do I want to sit in the stands with the audience or do I want to sit on the floor with Chuck and the writers and, the cast and watch it from Video Village? And the great thing about watching it from Video Village is that I can go to craft services and eat all the food that I want backstage. And last time I was at Georgie and Mandy, they had these great steamed dumplings that were delicious. And I am back there eating and they're like, curtain call. And I'm like, you're moving too fast for me. I haven't finished eating. I'm like, please stop and make this go slower. So it's probably, and they also do some pre-shoots as well because there is a baby in Georgie and Mandy. It's maybe like 2.5, 3 hours max.
Wow.
So
that's really quick in terms of
for a live studio audience,
or even the things that I've gone to in terms of live tapings. But they'll rehearse this or they'll shoot a scene and then it'll cut. And usually the writers will gather or Chuck and the writers and try to get alt lines, or will they be pitching on the spot?
They do that too. I mean, they will admit you'll see them down there, and that's no secret. But they're just so good, and they have it so dialed in, and the actors are so on top of things, especially Montana Jordan, who plays Georgie. He just absorbs things like a sponge. So they could give him, and it's the same. And it's funny. I think it's in another episode of the podcast that Chuck and I do together. Chuck talks about the fact that Montana Jordan, who plays Georgie, reminds him of Jim Parsons in the way that he was able to, on the spot, get a brand new monologue or piece of dialogue and just learn it right then and there and make it work. And it's really incredible to see. It's
a real, like Jason Alexander on Seinfeld had this gift as well, from what I hear, of being able to get something last minute, lock it in, do it, get tons of notes on it, and then do every note with laser-like precision.
Yeah. What the hell?
No, that's what it makes you. You see that it's like an art form, and that's why, especially with multicams, I'm like, but like you got to pay. It might not be what people are used to, but like it really is this kind of art in and of itself.
It's as close to theater as you can get. My parents still don't understand, by the way. They're like, what is this between single cam and multicam? And like, I try to explain, they still don't get it, but I'm like.
Which, by the way, they shouldn't. They should just be wrapped up in the magic of the show and not the production of it. But I think the audience, like watching or listening to this, we like to know how things are made, and that's why I think these kind of podcasts, people really will dig, because it is these behind the scenes stories.
I hope so, because I love the snacks at Warner Brothers so much. So when I'm there, I'm like, guys,
I feel bad that we didn't have any snacks for you. That we gave you a bottle of water.
Well, I just came from there, so I got so much. I got so many. My backpack is filled. I brought a cooler with hard-boiled eggs and popcorn and that's the other fun thing, is that when guests come, I will not name the person who did this, but it was hysterical. He was eating hard-boiled eggs during the filming of the podcast, and I gave him a bag so he could fill it up like he was trick-or-treating after he was leaving to go put food in. And it was, I mean, they've got enough money to go buy out Ralph's or Gelson's, but there's still the idea of something free right then and there is like, oh, this is so exciting. Like, what have we got? So
you talk to all the creatives. Is there ever, or will you consider doing this, of talking to the fans, talking to the people that are so obsessed and why they're obsessed? And I don't mean my dad, but like there's so many, there's so many people like my dad that are just obsessed, and I get curious. I get curious of why, like we talked about this at the very beginning of how this reaches so many different generations, but it's also interesting to see what it means to them.
Yes, I want to do that. We couldn't, obviously, while we've been recording it, because we couldn't let it get out, the secret that this is happening and stuff. But now I'm hoping, hopefully, if we get additional seasons, we'll be able to do that. And also, to me, there is nothing more fun than surprising a true fan with somebody from the show and watching them just lose it completely. Like, I love that. And we did, one of our guests actually coming up is Mark Sweet, who was the audience warm-up guy for Big Bang for every episode.
So he would get everybody clapping, telling jokes, get them laughing.
And Mark saw his share of marriage proposals and everything else.
People were proposing in the audience.
Oh, yeah. And And so he told us all about those stories, which are so great to hear. Also, here's somebody else that I think fans will love is Nikki Laurie, who is Chuck Lorre's daughter. She grew up on that show. She started off as a PA, worked her way up to second AD, then director. And to hear from Nikki Laurie, who is one of my favorite people because she is so honest and she does not shy away from talking about the fact that Chuck is her father and, you know, what that comes with and what people assume. And she is so honest and open in a way that I find incredibly refreshing. She may or may not also sing Soft Kitty for us on the podcast. But she is a great insight that I think people will be truly inspired by when they hear her story, as well as so many others about like what their time was really like behind the show from what we saw.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of prima donnas involved in the Big Bang Theory.
Well, you know, there might have been Cinnamon the dog or something, but you know.
No, it really is impressive when, you know, like just even going into the podcast thinking that like I don't think I've heard an interview with Chuck Lorre before. I've heard it with Jim and with Johnny and like these people, but you know, for some reason I didn't recall. And then I was like, wow, it just seems about the work.
Yes.
And that's what I was impressed by. And I wanted to ask this in terms of the writers of this show, because it wasn't just comedy writers. Right. Like there's like scientists and physicists that he hired as sitcom writers.
Yes. And well, he had Professor David Saltzberg, who teaches still at UCLA. He was with the show for the entire run. He also was a contributing producer to Young Sheldon as well. He came on for a few episodes to talk about some of the science, but not in a way that you're like, oh God, I'm not going to understand anything. He had some fascinating insight and intel to the second season finale when the guys go to the North Pole that I was actually shocked to hear about, and it involved their costumes. And I was like, and he's like, I don't even know if I'm supposed to admit this on air, but I'm just going to tell you. And he was just so fascinating. I could ask him about things that I sound like a complete dodo bird, but he was able to really put it all in layman's terms. And it's so fun to have an actual scientist there who will tell you the inner workings of this show. And it was fascinating.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the writers, his name was Eric something, I think, but he came to the acting studio I used to work with during Big Bang Theory, but I believe he was one of the writers, and he was like a physicist or something.
Eric Kaplan?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
He's on the podcast. He is so smart, it's scary.
And he was told to come take acting classes just to appreciate actors and I thought that was so fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's also really fun to see. I don't know about you, how you felt about this, but I remember watching Friends growing up and being obsessed with the writers and producers in the credits and wanting to know who these people were.
Yep.
So now you get to see the faces behind the names that you have always heard of. And that, I mean, maybe that just geeks me out even more, but I find that so interesting to see like, who are these people whose names we have seen on all the credits, like an Eric Kaplan, like a Lee Aronson, a Dave Getch, you know, Steve
And
Laurel,
if you geek out on that, you realize these people have resumes, you know, before and beyond Big Bang Theory, where they are now kind of legends in their field.
Yes.
So really quickly, to move a little bit away from Big Bang Theory, which we're going to stream on Max.
I'm sorry, Bill.
Listen to the podcast. I just wanted to know, what else are you watching? What do you watch on television these days?
I mean, everything, it feels like.
It's a lot right now.
It's a lot. And I have to say, too, like, the world is such a scary place that I feel like I'm watching more scripted TV than ever before, just to take my...
And it's been a while since I've watched this much scripted television. I watched tons of reality.
Yeah.
But now, in this last year, or in the last 6 months specifically, I have hit a lot of scripted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, The White Lotus on Max, I cannot get enough of.
Okay, I was just talking to a producer. We were... Because I feel like I have to defend this season of The White Lotus to people. And do you think it's attention span? Do you think, because I feel like at this point, Mike White has earned our trust, and I'm enjoying, like, I put my phone down and I'm like, just take me wherever you want to take me.
Loving it. I think, listen, I don't know. I know I've heard from a lot of people, they feel like this season is a little bit slower to start.
Sure.
But I don't know. To me, you have to set up the characters in order to get that payoff. And I'm just loving watching them. And
Me too.
It's an escape and it's beautiful. And I also think it does help in this season if you've maybe watched the other two, because there is that payoff with, the Jennifer Coolidge,
Natasha Rothwell character.
All that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm loving it. I really am. And I just saw the next episode, an advanced screener.
I just got sent the screener this morning, and I was like, I'm going to go home tonight and watch
it.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm loving and living for the White Lotus, and the fact that they haven't even started shooting season 4 yet is so disturbing to me, because I'm like, we're going to have to wait another 2 years.
Well, and it's
probably.
all in this one. It's all in Mike White, like director, writer,
yes.
producer,
craft services, probably. Like, it's insane.
I mean, you think about Mike White, Chuck and Buck, that first independent film that he did, and then he shows up on Survivor at a certain point, being a successful writer at that point, and now. He really is this kind of, he's becoming this cultural icon in a sense.
Yes, it's so true. I mean, I hope we get so many more White Lotuses, down the road.
It's so fun to like cast it in your head. Like people are going to have an appreciation for Parker Posey that maybe forgot about Parker Posey.
Yes. I said that to Brooke Shields when I was talking to her recently at the SAG Awards. I was like, Brooke, you would be great on the White Lotus. Like, I just feel like, couldn't you see her?
Jim Parsons would be great on the White Lotus.
Would be great. Any of these people, So, yeah. I know. I'm already casting season 4 for them.
It's so sad because we're at episode 6 right now.
Yep.
This is we've only
coming up to episode 6.
We only got a couple more. This Friday is the end of Severance, season 2. Are you watching Severance?
Watching Severance. I'm also, by the way, if you want a new show to watch that is really juicy and kind of like Big Little Lies meets Breaking Bad, Apple TV Plus has a new series with John Hamm and Olivia Munn and Amanda Peet coming out called Your Friends and Neighbors. Yes.
So you recommend that?
So much so. Love it so much. It's going to be a weekly drop coming out in April, and it's fantastic.
My problem, so Max is my favorite streaming service. I swear. I mean, people know that.
Same.
But
can I tell you why also really quick? So because, as a journalist, you get subscriptions for free for these. I was paying for Max out of my own pocket because that's how much I love it.
I still pay for Max out of my own pocket.
Do you really?
Yes.
Yeah,
but gladly.
Yes.
Because, they have all the ID Discovery stuff. They have the TLC stuff. So it is interesting, though, being a fan of HBO and then spinning off to Max. But with Apple TV, I sometimes get confused where I'm like, is this like a funneling money operation? Because sometimes I feel like they have these amazing shows, but they don't advertise them in a certain. It's like, we dare you to find us sometimes.
Right. Yes. No. Well, you should see. I made a video actually this morning that I have to post because people were like, I'm on Max. Where do I find the podcast? And I'm like, okay, so you got to go to Big Bang's homepage, and then you'll see it says.
Oh, this is great, actually. Take the audience through.
Yeah, you go to Max, log on to Max, and then go to the Big Bang Theory's page, and you'll see episodes, and you'll see something that says more like it. Don't click on that, even though, yes, there's more like it that you'll love. The next tab is extras. Click on extras, and under that is where the podcast
That's if
lives.
you want to watch it on Max, even though you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts
on Apple
and Spotify.
Podcasts, on the official YouTube page for the Big Bang Theory. There will also be more clips there.
But you're dressed up as a surgeon in one of the episodes,
I know,
so you need to see it visually.
Also, there is, for the episode that Soft Kitty was introduced, there may or may not be Nikki, Lori, and I dressed up with cat sweatshirts for the holiday episode that Steve Millar was there for. He wore the Santa hat that, of course, Penny wears in that episode. I wore a Hanukkah sweater. Any chance that I could, I was dressed up in something. It's just fun. It is just fun to relive this. And, and I know fans have been asking for so long, I want more episodes of this show. And listen, I'm not in charge of that. You have to go to Chuck for that. And yes, he's working on the spinoff, but I'm like, let's go back and just really do a deep dive into these iconic episodes, because God knows there's a lot of them.
And I think that you saw with the book being a New York Times bestseller, people were interested. There was an audience for this.
There's an audience, and I was so proud of it, because I have to say, too, I always felt Big Bang did not get the respect it deserved. It never won an Emmy Award for Best Comedy Series, and that was a travesty because it deserved it. Jim Parsons, of course, won a lot of Emmys for the role, but the show itself didn't. It was nominated but didn't win, and I wanted this book to really drive home also why it deserved to win it. And the fact that it showed up on the New York Times bestseller list, that was, to me, I consider that like the Emmy. Chuck might be like, okay, but I'd still like the actual Emmy.
Man,
but I'm like, that says, to see the Big Bang Theory on the New York Times bestseller, it's like Told you so.
And now you are part of the Big Bang history.
You know
are
what?
part
I'm
of
a
the
small
lore.
part of it, and I'm so lucky.
I can't believe you are taking credit for the entire Big Bang Theory. I cannot believe that did you guys hear that? She is not humble at all. What a prima donna. This has been fantastic.
I've so enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too. This is just two geeks geeking out. I hope we get to talk again someday because I can't wait to tune into this.
Well, we got to have you and your
episode.
dad on the podcast to discuss it all because, I love talking to fans about it.
I've had a podcast for like 5 years, and I think he's finally going to learn how to listen to podcasts because of your podcast. Like, that's how sad is that it's going to be your podcast that gets him into podcasts.
Wait, this is the funniest. So my parents don't understand the podcast world either.
Yeah.
And mom's like, so what is it like? And then when I told her that it was dropping on Max on Monday, March 17th, she says to me, okay, but what time? And I was like, well, when it drops at midnight, it's available. Yeah, I understand that. But what time do I tune in to watch it? I was like, it's just there, Mom. Like, it's just there.
Well, that's what I finally, Dad finally figured out the DVR. And then it's like to try to explain Max to him, even it's like, Big Bang, it all lives here, Dad. You can erase that DVR entirely. He has every episode of Big Bang Theory, Young Sheldon, all of these shows on his DVR. I'm like, you can go right to this app.
But you know
and
what?
Get
Can I
all
tell
of it.
you a secret? I still have DirecTV because there's something I really like about just scrolling through the channels. And also, I know this is crazy. I still record episodes of The Big Bang Theory on that DVR, and I will sometimes play it.
There is a comfort in, but also there's a comfort in live television too. When you used to watch like Big Bang live, and you just felt like you were part of the world at that moment.
But here, I will tell you this: it is interesting. I'll watch an episode as it aired on CBS, and then I'll watch it on Max to see what was left out, what made it to the Max version, because you have those commercials when it originally aired. So there are certain things you'll get an extra, few seconds of here, or you'll get a sperm bank scene or whatever. So it's really cool to see it all on Max. But I like to see also, how did it really work when it first aired too?
Okay, so your job is to go subscribe to the podcast, rate it 5 stars, watch it on Max, watch 279 episodes, 280 if you can find the scenes from the original pilot that never aired, and read the book. So that's just a little bit of work that
we're not giving them any homework at all.
No, this should all be enjoyable. This should be fun. And by the way, there's no time constraint on this, but we are in a little bit of a time constraint because we want to make sure the podcast gets a second season. So if
it does have a second season. We want a third and
season.
Fourth and fifth and sixth and all that.
So so guys, just build this audience like the Big Bang Theory built their audience on television. But Jessica Radloff, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ryan. This was so much fun. I appreciate you.